Well, it's a privilege to have back with us Dr. Neil Anderson. Dr. Anderson is the founder of Freedom in Christ Ministries and is the best-selling author or co-author of more than 50 books, including The Bondage Breaker, Victory Over Darkness, and Discipleship Counseling. For over 40 years, Dr. Anderson has been teaching and equipping people worldwide to find freedom in all areas of life. And so, Dr. Anderson, welcome back. Great to have you again.
Thanks for having me. It's
Always
good to be
a pleasure.
Here. Yes.
Well, this is the newest book that you have out now, The Core of Christianity, Rediscovering Authentic Unity and Personal Wholeness in Christ. And so I just have to ask you, you've written a lot of books. Why did you feel the need that this one needed to be put to paper?
Well, I felt the need about 4 or 5 years ago, but I actually tabled it because it starts out in a way, kind of an evaluation of the church around the world. And I surely did not want to come across as some grumpy old man kind of frustrated at the church, or even as a critic for that matter. But I've seen the good and the bad, and being in a variety of cultures, having a variety of education, writing on a variety of subjects, and my own Christian experience, being in a variety of denominations. I actually attended for about 1.5 years an Orthodox church. I mean, everybody there was actually evangelical, so you probably didn't get a good picture of it. But I just wanted to have that experience of the church calendar. So I've been, my wife and I were Episcopalians when we got married, and then we found Christ, kind of a thing. And I'm an ordained Baptist, but by and large, my identity isn't there. I'm a child of God. It's man who basically has established all these barriers, and that's part of the reason for the book. If the Lord has prayed that we would all be one, what would that look like? I mean, you can have a major church in town, and it'll have some impact in the community, but they represent, what, 0.5% of the population, so they have no political clout. What would happen, however, if all the churches somehow united and represented 10, 20, 30% maybe of that community? They'd have a powerful clout. But individually we don't. And so that's part of the problems that we're facing, that we don't have the voice we could have in the community if we were essentially united. Now that's the bigger purpose, but there's a lot more to the book than just that, because if you just try to say, gee, you ought to become united, we probably never get there.
Well, your subtitle is Authentic Unity, so there's something that's authentic that maybe is missing in a lot of places.
Well, absolutely. I mean, the old ecumenicalism, that eventually died, because it degenerated to the most liberal element, is what happened was. And so I'm not talking about that. That'll never accomplish anything. You still have remnants of that. But by and large, all the conservative people basically just fell off, because, what have we got anymore? We don't have Christ. We got some kind of a lowest denominator that's connecting us together. True unity can only be based on the fact that we're united together in Christ. When Paul says, be diligent to preserve the unity of the Spirit, the implication is it's already there. Now, I've actually seen that. I mean, I've seen it in our work. I've seen all these diverse denominations and church groups come together for a conference, discover who they are in Christ, find their freedom in Christ, and suddenly they're hugging each other. I mean, and it's there, Ron. Yeah. But it's not being realized because we're majoring in our minors. We're getting our identity out of something else. And so that's the first part of the book, is to explain that.
You use a great illustration of a symphony orchestra. Yeah. How does that illustration
work?
I
think that's what God intended. I think he made some basses, some trombones, and some violins. But if you're playing your instrument by yourself, it doesn't sound all that good. But the concept, I think, is that if you've ever gone to a great musical production, they're all up there playing their own instruments, trying to tune it in, and you get this cacophony of sound, and it's just like, this is horrible. And then suddenly, the lead violin stands up and plays the middle C, and all of a sudden you've got harmony, and then out comes the conductor, and you hear this beautiful music. But if you got everybody playing their own pieces, the sound isn't very good. And sometimes the world sees that, and they see the sound that's coming out of our churches. Everybody's doing their own thing. I said, doesn't sound very good. So I know it's a pipe dream. I mean, but truth of the matter is we should be working towards that anyhow. And so the music that's coming out of the churches sounds like we've got one conductor. Yeah. Should be that way.
Yeah, that's for sure. Now, you tackle some different extremes that we find in different streams, I guess, of the church. And and you say that these things can be obstacles, but you have an illustration right at the beginning that you keep referring back to throughout the book, and I might have you just kind of give an overview of it. And we'll have it come up on the screen, and we can just take a look at what you're talking about.
Well, I created this little grid. I said, if God is over here and man is over here, and then you see the spiritual reality and the natural realities of this world, not to pit them as opposites, but to see the center of that is Christ. I mean, he's the God-man. One person, two natures, all of that fought out during the ecumenical councils. So he is a God-man. And so there is the balance. And there is the focus, is to be Christ-centered in your marriage, your ministry. And that's been our ministry, is to get people free, their marriage is free, and their ministry is free in Christ. And we have, tools that accomplish that, all based on the fact that God himself is the church consultant and the wonderful counselor and the one who's going to accomplish this, because we can't humanly do that. But the point was that if you stray off too far, you emphasize too much spiritual, not enough natural, too much humanism, not enough, and everything is God and we don't have to do anything, you're out of balance. Well, what that did was it kind of established 4 quadrants of sense. Here's a very God-centered, but also very natural-centered, which is a lot of our evangelical churches in the West. People in Canada and the United States don't realize that what dominates our culture is rationalism and naturalism. We have a totally different worldview than South Americans, Africans, Indonesians have, and Asians. Totally different. And you have to get out of your culture to see that. And it's changing. Postmodernism is coming in, and it's changing, and not all for good, by the way, but it is changing it. And so then you see all the liberal movement where the focus is the natural and the human. And by the way, we have churches in all of those quadrants, and hopefully they're all coming to Christ. But you can just see what's happened. And almost all of our helping professions came out of that medical model. And so, especially in the States, I'd have to say that what dominates that are our doctors and our psychologists, and much of the methodology and thinking has come out of the secular world. And then you move up the left side, and it's kind of human-based, but it's very spiritual. And you got New Age, and you got Spiritism, and then you move over here, and you have this ecclesiastical problem where everybody's a prophet and apostle, and claiming titles for themselves, and it gets bizarre after a while. And you can now around this circle, Christ, we have to have tolerance because we're all coming at Christ from our different backgrounds and perspectives. So it's really kind of a find the balance. What I've discovered, Ron, and it's really exciting, how can I bring all this diversity in the Christian church together? And the only basis is around Christ. And I started to wonder myself, I said, why is that group asking me to come? Or why is that group asking me to come? And because they've all saw something in what we were saying that overlaps with what they're doing. And think of it this way. Any denomination, any educational group, any political group, proponents make up a bell-shaped curve. The leaders are all basically at the center of that curve. If they stray too far off the party line, they're marginalized. And so when election time comes in politics, everybody scrambles to the center or they're going to keep their day job because they don't represent the population. Now, to climb up in those circles, you got to pretty well maintain that party line. So denominational schools, they will have their teaching documents that you have to sign every year that to say I am this or I am that. But what actually defines the center is never Christ. It's always something else. Well, we're Calvinist. Well, we're Arminian. Well, we're charismatic. Well, we're not. And and that actually becomes how you identify yourself. It also serves as a barrier to having fellowship with that group over there because they're almost perceived as one of them. And what I'm saying is, it isn't just a question, who am I? I'm a child of God. As many as received him, to them he gave the right to become a child of God. So it's not just an individual identity, it's also a corporate identity. And we start finding our identity out of the fact that I'm a Pentecostal or I'm a Baptist. Well, whatever defines that. Case in point, I have he's Southern Baptist. He's a friend, but he's kind of a theologian. And he would have the introductory course into their seminary. Now, there's a variety of students, mind you, but he asked the question, he said, men and women, why are we Baptist? And he pushed and he pushed and he pushed, but nobody would say Jesus. Now, he would be someone who would really agree with what I'm saying. And you know, there's nothing wrong with Baptist distinctives by and large. So I'm not here to even, that's not even the primary issue to me. It's kind of like the struggle we had, you know, interdenominationally over tongues. Well, about 6, 7 years ago in the States, the Assemblies of God said, let's reassert our commitment. We believe in the second work of grace, evidenced by the gift of tongues. And so if you want to rise up in those circles, you've got to have that experience. At the same time, in Nashville, where I live, headquarters of Southern Baptist, they actually passed a decree that if you spoke in tongues, you couldn't be part of the missionary effort.